Hello, hello everyone. Good morning. How are you? Happy Friday, everyone.
Mhm.
Good. Carl, I like it. Hi, David, Deborah, Cynthia. How are you? Hi, Remy, Shannon. How are you doing? Hi, Cheryl. Hi, Angela. How are you? Sahara. I see Stefan. Aaron, how are you? Hi, Frank. Lorna.
I'm doing good, thank you.
Nice. Sean, how are you? All right. So I wanted to welcome everyone. We're letting more people in to the next education and workforce working group today. If you check the chat, there is a link to the Etherpad for today, so you can sign in. But not only sign in, you can answer that one little question that we have if you want when you sign in. So each time with your name and your title and your institution. But here's also where you can ask questions or put resources that you think the group should know about. And so if you click on that link in the chat, you'll see that others have already started signing in here. Hi, Uma, how are you?
Hi, good.
Good.
I was on mute.
So no problem. Do you see the link in the chat to sign in for the Etherpad?
Yes, I'm going to do that.
Great. So while everyone is signing in, I want to give the overview of the working group again for those that may be new. So this is the Data Science Education and Workforce Working Group. This is a group it's open to professionals and data science educators and program leaders to talk and hear from one another, as well as learn about resources that are connecting data, tools, and industry partners and research around this area. So we have three focuses for this group, three focus areas. One is looking at the purpose of the overall group is to have a focus on three things. One, highlighting funded data science education projects and resources. Two, to share best practices for project-based courses and teaching approaches. And three, to provide experiences with assessment or evaluation of data science programs and courses. So I welcome all of you here, and we have a goal. Hi, Martin, how are you? We're introducing everyone. If people who have just joined can also look at the chat and click on the link for the Etherpad to sign in and also see the agenda for today and take notes. So as we go through, the goal overall for the working group is to, one, have a connected network of data science educators and program leaders. So that's you. So we hope through these Etherpads that we get to connect with each other more, and you get to connect among each other more to learn more about your programs and what you're doing. Second, hopefully we're going to be taking notes through the South Big Data Hub, and also your notes looking at these Etherpads to try and get a recommendations guide based on the presentations we see for teaching project-based data science courses, and hopefully a resource list as well. So we really encourage you to put links and other things that you feel would be helpful to the community or that you would like to see in the Etherpad. We will take those in and try to make a resource list. And also models for evaluating data science courses and programs. So if you know anyone that's doing this, or you're doing it, or you have a thought about it, to please put that in. So for that, I'll welcome myself. First, I'm Dr. Nada Rawlings-Goss. I'm the Executive Director of the South Big Data Innovation Hub. It's one of 4 big data innovation hubs that are serving to connect the data science ecosystem across academics, industry, and government partners. And so today, we're going to have 2 speakers that are going to be talking about their experience with their data science project. And first up is going to be Dr. Li Shi, and his talk is going to be on a cross-domain approach for analyzing COVID-19 data, but using the electricity sector. So actually looking at electricity data and how that can impact COVID. So really interesting. So he's a professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering, and he is at the University of Texas A&M. And he is the director of the Energy Digitization at Texas A&M Energy Institute. So we'll start off, if you can share your screen, Lee, and we'll start today. And as we're going, if you're in the Etherpad, you can ask any questions. There's a section for questions for the presenter. So even if we don't get to them, we can ask them live. Lee will be in there to answer questions afterwards as well on the pad. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everybody. And it's my great honor and pleasure to be joining this South Big Data Hub Data Science Education and Workforce Working Group. Thanks, Ranata, for giving us the opportunity. And what I'll be talking about in the next 20 minutes or 25 minutes or so is some of our recent work that is focusing on using a data-driven and data science approach to understand a unique sector, namely the US electricity sector, on the impact, especially the short-run impact due to COVID-19. So I guess I don't need to motivate any more about the impact of COVID. Everybody must have seen the news this morning, and as a country, we are far from, being over this challenge. So this really kind of started out just as the country went through the lockdown in the middle of March, and all the students, especially those grad students, postdocs, were staying in their own apartments and houses and so on, and we were all kind of just isolated. But we were thinking in a sort of we're all asking, like, what can we do? What can we do? We are definitely not medical experts, so we can't develop vaccines. But my area of expertise is in the electricity sector, in particular power systems. So we thought, well, given that power infrastructure is one of the key enabling infrastructure of any modern society, perhaps we should take a look at how COVID is affecting the industry, and then hopefully utilize some of the data-driven approaches to inform the policymakers and system planners, so that as we are planning to go out of this pandemic, we are better informed and better prepared, and to make more science-driven decision makings. So that really was the motivation. And I should really give a big shout out to the group of dedicated graduate students, postdocs, and my collaborators listed here for making this from just a very kind of a quick concept at the middle of March to some full fruition into some concrete research papers and projects and so on. So I'll just have a very brief overview of COVID as a public health in terms of its timeline, so that we are better put into the context. And then I'll talk about the short run impact. First, with some just very quick visual impression that you will be able to see perhaps for the first time. And then I'll then dive a little bit deeper on some of the data-driven scientific approaches to understanding the impact of the electricity sector, and then some potential future opportunities to develop further research and public engagement. So this is where we have gone through. The first case started in January 21st. On March 13, the US declares the national emergency and practically everybody went to lockdown. And I don't know about you, but we still are by and large conducting education and research online, even as of today. So I don't even, I lost count of how many cases and so on, because it's just too many. And it looks like, you know, we are still far from being done with it. So I hope each and every one of you and your family continue to stay safe and healthy. So just kind of there are some global study report, notably this one published by the International Energy Administration, that is talking about sort of a macro level impact of COVID on the global energy sector. The kind of a quick takeaway is that because of the economic downturn that this COVID is, you know, bringing about, there's likely going to be a reduction on the investment on the new power equipment and resources. So that is going to have some impact on the renewable energies continued deployment throughout the world. This is something that we kind of we were featured in one of the recent IEEE Spectrum articles. So I want you to just take a look at this, you know, beautiful island of Manhattan, the city of New York. And this is something that NASA capture using their nighttime image data. So after we, of course, you know, this is taken during the midnight of February 8th and April 25th, okay? Of course, there are some ambient lighting. So we actually took some algorithm to take care of this ambient lighting. So what you see here is pretty much the lighting of the human activities, right? Electricity lighting. So what is your impression? You know, the average brightness of the picture on the left is 257, and the average intensity of the brightness on the right is 154. I was literally shocked when I first saw it. The city of New York was dimmed down by about 40%. And what is causing that? And you know what? It's COVID, right? So it actually has the city was dimmed down, and you know that in a very visual way indicated how this is impacting human society, and in a direct way on how it's impacting the electricity sector. So we thought, okay, what can we do? You know, we are engineers, we are data scientists. Perhaps what one can do as a public service is that we can try to collect all these open public domain data and trying to put them into a open source and cross-domain data hub, so that researchers and public policymakers could have a, you know, one-stop shop to just go and find whatever data they would like to see, and then trying to develop and hopefully encourage data-driven decision makings as we're trying to get out of this pandemic. So this is the link you can actually go and check out. The keyword is cross-domain and public domain data. So we are utilizing open data sources and then trying to put them in a nice way so that you can go and have the most of the information at this one place. So just to kind of continue to give some of the visual impression. How does COVID affect human society? This is again a different, you know, colored picture of the one I just showed you about New York City. But not only New York, pretty much all the major metropolitan areas around the country were, you know, substantially affected by the COVID, just by looking at the nighttime image data. So Houston, Boston, LA, you know, from East Coast to the West Coast, you know, all the cities are affected. And those are just very visual, because we believe that we are a highly visual species. So we just want to kind of, at least before any quantitative assessment, to give you some visual impression of how this is affecting our lives. And then this is how the data hub is actually being architected and constructed. So you can see there are a few pieces of key data sources that we are fetching on a daily basis, even up to today. One is across the nation, there are wholesale electricity market data sets, right? So for instance, New York, New England, Texas, California. So these are all, electricity market at wholesale level, and they publish a lot of daily data on electricity sector. But we didn't stop at the electricity sector. We also look at something that we would have otherwise never touched. For instance, the public health data set. So many of you may have gone to this Johns Hopkins data hub for COVID-19 related information. So we also fetch data from that data source. And also we have some 40 to 50 million mobile device data set that we obtained from SafeGraph. And those are describing anonymized a mobile device location data set during this period. And of course, this NASA they also have the open data set on satellite image data for nighttime imaging. So that we also collect. And then we go through this data hub of some automatic data quality checking and correction, and then we put them together into this data hub. And you're welcome to check it out. So this is just, again, a three-dimension view of the data hub. You have a temporal and categorical and locational differences. And just for those who are not necessarily familiar with the electricity sector, these are the parts of the US that is covered by wholesale level electricity markets. So some 85% of the population, and is essentially in with some sort of a wholesale level electricity market in which much of the data sets are becoming available and in the public domain. So this, again, one of the natural questions for any kind of a data science problems is how do you handle data qualities, because we are talking of massive amount of data coming in on a daily basis, right? So you have COVID cases, you have mobile devices, you have electricity. How do you make sure that these data sets are at least, to the first order, have some level of data quality check? So we actually have developed a automatic process to figure out if there were some outlier data and how do we then correct them using historical trends. So just to kind of give you some deeper quantitative assessment on the impact on electricity. One of the things that people care a lot about is that does COVID affect renewable generation, right? Because the renewable generation is one of the biggest growing sources of power generation in the electricity sector. And the answer is not much. Perhaps there is even a slight increase in the use of renewable energy just because of the general trend of increasing deployment of renewable energy resources. What about the prices? So as I said, there is 85% of the country covered by wholesale level electricity market. The market will definitely have prices. In fact, they have prices for day ahead and for 5 minutes ahead, and these are well, established wholesale level marketplaces. Because of the load change, electricity demand changes, the price is also under some substantial fluctuations. They're going down quite significantly in most of the markets. And they're going down not only in terms of their average, but also they're sort of a much more concentrated. So I just gave you a example here. This is the Boston hub in the New England market. So you can see the prices from 2017 to 2020 going leftwards, right? Leftwards meaning the price on average is going down, and also it's becoming narrower. Narrower meaning the concentration is there is a less spread out of the prices. Right? Now, let's go a bit even further on the more kind of scientific approaches to have some deeper understanding of this. What we have presented you so far is very much a kind of a domain specific, right? We look at renewable production, we look at load, and we look at other things. But we felt that a really, I think, a powerful idea and perhaps a powerful analysis tool is to really go beyond a particular domain of data set, right? You want to go maybe cross-domain, combining electricity with public health, combining electricity with mobility and so on. And that perhaps will give you some further insights that traditional electricity power system analysis would have not given you, right? So that's what we are going to talk about in the next few minutes. And this is really has just been featured by this paper, just fresh off of the press. It's going to, it's already available in the online, but it's going to be available for the November issue of the Jewel, which is sort of one of the most prestigious journal in the energy sector. So the details are all described in there. And so one thing that I think is actually very important for any kind of data science education and educators is that when we're trying to utilize data to compare and then say, what is the impact of a particular event, let's say COVID-19, a good way of doing that is really not just compare, let's say 2020 data with 2019 data, right? If you look at electricity consumption of 2020, and then you say, oh, compared to 2019, this is the change, and then you attribute that to COVID. Is that a good exercise? Probably not. Why? Because there's a lot of ambient condition changes. 2020 may be a little bit warmer than 2019. 2020 may be a little bit more humid than 2019. So you have to exclude all these other environmental factors before you can attribute, exclusively on the impact on one particular event, such as COVID-19. So I guess that's what economists would call counterfactual, right? Or a statistician might call it baseline, right? So, so I think it is important when we are analyzing this kind of impact to establish a counterfactual or baseline, meaning, asking the following question: what would have been the electricity consumption in 2020 should there were no COVID-19, right? And that became the baseline. And then you can compare the actual 2020 electricity consumption with that baseline. That then became a much more rigorous attribution of the difference due to COVID-19, right? So I hope you got that point. And to do that, we actually utilized a deep neural network approach to establish this backcast model. And that turned out to be a fairly robust and rigorous and accurate approaches to establishing the baseline. Why do we claim so? So perhaps a good way to claiming so is to look at, just in the year of 2020, right before COVID hit us. So perhaps looking at January and February, right? When the country was largely not affected by COVID yet. And then you look at this, the blue curve, which is the real electricity consumption. And then you look at this, a gray curve, which is the counterfactual. You see these two are just about the same, right? So that means that before COVID hit us, this counterfactual and the real are just about the same. So that's a good indicator that you're doing a good job of having this counterfactual or backcast model. Now moving forward, look at what happened in March, April, early and late April. You can see there's a drastic difference. So I want you to focus on the difference between the blue curve and the gray curve. I want you to look at the blue curve and the gray curve. Why? Because that's the real difference because of COVID, right? You should not look at the difference between the blue curve and orange curve. Orange curve is just a simple looking at 2019 and the contrast the difference between 2019 and 2020. Because that may give you a wrong impression of the impact. For instance, on March the 2nd, while the impact of COVID is still relatively mild, you do see a difference between the electricity consumption in this middle curve. And that was largely due to the other ambient conditions changes. So that should not be attributed to the impact of COVID. Whereas moving down to say deep into late April, where New York was really heavily affected, it was one of the epicenters, you do see that the gray curve and the blue curve has a substantial difference. And that could be well attributed due to COVID. Okay, so that's the point I want to make. And then, not only—
Sorry, Lee, there's just 1 minute, just give me the timing.
Sure. Okay, I'll then wrapping up my talk with just one last message, which is how do you explain that? How do you best indicate this kind of changes? So that is really, again, this cross domain that is going to give us a lot of insight. So I want to kind of give you some visualization of the mobility data of the US population. This is mainly how much percentage of the US population are staying at home. And the more towards the kind of a pink color, the more we're staying home. So you can see that as we kind of move from February all the way to April, there is a substantial increase of population staying at home. And it turns out that, that's actually a very important indicator of the impact of electricity consumption changes. So I just want to leave you with one, technical detail. That is, in order to do that kind of analysis, we adopted this Nobel laureate Professor Christopher Sim's idea of establishing this vector autoregression as a way of understanding multiple factors impact and on the value of interest. For instance, we are interested in the electricity consumption, but we have a number of factors. For instance, mobility, public health, and staying at home, and so on. So you can actually develop these very rigorous tools, and then to figure out what exactly is the most perhaps highest impact factor that is affecting the electricity consumption. And the one thing I want to highlight to you is this one called mobility in the retail sector. It turns out that, how often people go to visit the retail sector. For example, how often, how do you go to do your grocery shopping and so on, is actually one of the strongest indicators of the impact on the electricity consumption changes. So, so that again enables us and also provided us the opportunity to conduct more rigorous assessment on the impact on the of COVID on the electricity sector. So this is the kind of the framework of this VAR that enables us to do such analysis. And that provides insight for policymakers. For example, in the city of New York and in the city of Houston, the kind of impact factor is actually quite different. It turns out that in Houston, the visit to the retail sector is not that big of an impact factor as compared to New York City, which I think is sort of interesting, because also understandable, because New York City is perhaps a much more concentrated commercial area as compared to the Houston area. And it also gives you some hypothetical questions that you can answer. What if scenarios? Like, what if I have 1% increase in the visit to the retail sector? How much does that impact electricity? What if we have 1% increase in the daily new confirmed COVID cases? How does that affect electricity? So we can develop this kind of what if dynamic assessment on the impact of electricity. So with that, I want to just kind of conclude saying that we're still far from being over of this pandemic, and we're trying our best to see what we can help as a public service and education on helping policymakers, helping planners and operators to kind of get out of this pandemic. And, we did our little share of utilizing the multiple domains of data sets to help with the electricity consumption production, which is actually highly correlated with the social economical activities in general. And we're pleased that NSF has just given us a new grant that would enable us to continue looking into that. And with that, I will stop and be happy to discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I know I want to be sure that we have Deborah on, but we may have time. I had one question about, this was a pretty short run project, and it was done with students once it was already remote. And so there's a lot of work done. How did you coordinate the students remotely to get this work done? What methods do you use to coordinate that?
The method is called Zoom, and Zooming day and night. Well, perhaps more seriously, I think having some back-end infrastructure is really important. For instance, this data hub gave us a lot of good, so we can, so we established this data hub precisely to make sure that we are collaborating in a more efficient and more productive manner. We also, conduct very frequent discussions over Zoom, and I don't know about you, but we kind of we use very similar to what you have done for this, Etherpad idea. We use Overleaf, right? We use Overleaf to share and collaborate our ideas and results and progress and so on. So I would say, I was quite inspired, by this process. I mean, just like everybody, we're all kind of locked at home, and we feel a little bit kind of depressed that we can't go anywhere, and there's nothing much we can do to help with this situation. But this project kind of gave us a sense of purpose and mission, and it kind of brought us together. In fact, I would say, we felt that we, even though physically we are, separated, but in spirit, and we felt like, we have a stronger sense of community and belonging and purpose. So that's actually a positive thing. Yeah.
Nice. So if others have questions, I want to be sure might have some time at the end. Please feel free to put them in the Etherpad, which is in the chat. So if you haven't signed in to the pad already, please do. And then also add any questions or resources. If you have done something similar with the project that you want to ask there, we will be looking at them, and then also we can answer questions too. So I wanted to move to our next speaker, who is Deborah Lafer. And she is going to be talking about remote sensing and data science and the opportunities and challenges there, and also discussing how that might relate to her way of doing it for our process for education and for teaching these courses. So she's at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and Columbia University, and has a wide-ranging background spanning from geotechnical and structural engineering to art history and historical preservation. So, Deborah, you wanted to share your screen?